Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nils, and in today's video, I want to walk you through how I created this bodysuit from scratch. The idea for this project first came to me when I saw Blackpink perform on James Corden. I just instantly fell in love with the outfit that Jennie had on, so I had to remake it. So the actual piece that Jennie is wearing is made by designer David Koma and retails for about $700, which is obviously out of my price range, but I knew that I could figure out how to make some version of it for much cheaper. However, I kind of bit off a little more than I can chew with this project. I started working on it during a really busy week for me, busy couple weeks actually, where just life has been doing life at me, you know. I did start a new job, which is great, so trying to figure out kind of a schedule of work and life balance and making videos as well has been a bit difficult, but I'm working on it. So in the process of making this bodysuit, I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't think the process or logistics through enough before I started, and that ultimately hindered me because I had to redo a lot of steps. But with the mistakes I made, it gives me a lot of opportunity to provide tips and tricks and reminders to anyone else who wants to start a similar project. I didn't film as much as I wanted to, mainly because it came to a point where I just wanted to get it done. Instead of this being a tutorial, it'll be much more of a walkthrough. So I will let a past version of me walk us through the process of how I created the bodysuit, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the end. First things first, I found a black and white stretch houndstooth fabric that I would be able to use for the bodysuit. This one cost about $8 a yard online. Additionally, I made patterns out of wrapping paper from clothes that I already have. Because this bodysuit in particular has sleeves, I used a long sleeve t-shirt and a pair of underwear.
Told me one day I'd be famous. Remember when she used to say she hate this. Back then they would laugh when I say shit. Now I'm inside all them people's playlists. So one day I'll be stomping on stages. But right now we're just dancing in the basement.
And here is where we reached the first of my many mistakes that have allowed me to provide some awesome tips and tricks and reminders to you to make your bodysuit making experience about 100 times easier. Either make sure your fabrics are of similar stretch, or take that into account when making your patterns and cutting out your fabric pieces. The shirt that I used to trace fits me very well, but it's also really stretchy, as compared to the fabric that I used, which does not have as much stretch. So when I redid this project, because yes, I did redo it, I added about 1.5 to 2 inches to the perimeter of my pattern pieces that I made from the shirt. And I would highly suggest making the adjustments and adding that seam allowance to the paper patterns as opposed to, I don't know, maybe estimating how much you should add when you're cutting, because I did that too, and just trust me and add the adjustments to the paper patterns, truly. Then I used my patterns, which I made to be used on fold, to guarantee symmetry, and I cut all the pieces I'd need out of my houndstooth fabric. Now make sure you're cutting your fabric in the correct orientation. There's more stretch one way than the other. To make your piece fit you but also be form-fitting, you want to cut it so that the stretch goes horizontally, so it fits all of your curves, which was the main mistake I made on my first try. As you can see in my initial front piece, the stretch should go horizontally, so it'll be able to, go over and fit my body, but it actually goes vertically, which doesn't help me when I'm trying to get it over my hips and love handles and butt and boobs or whatever. The funny thing is when I cut my pieces of fabric, I folded it in a way that I thought would save me the most fabric, but joke's on me because the first round of pieces I cut were all unusable in terms of making myself the bodysuit, So I got all the way to this point with this front piece, in addition to having a back piece and a couple of sleeves, that I realized this was not gonna fit. So I reluctantly threw in the towel and said, I have to start over. So I made new patterns based on those previous tips, and I cut out new pieces of fabric. However, because I had already folded and cut pieces out from the first round, I had to improvise to make sure I had enough fabric to fit the second round. I cut the main pattern piece into 2 halves, like a top and a bottom, just because I did not have enough fabric to make it fit in one. And that's actually why I have a seam right here down the middle of the front. There was no avoiding it because I just didn't have enough fabric, but I cut it in that V shape so that the seam would accentuate the shape. I tried to salvage what pieces of fabric I could, and I actually cut one of the bottom pieces of the completed bodysuit from the back of the original that I had. And if you didn't guess already, the reason why my bodysuit is one-sleeved is 100% because I just did not have enough fabric. I mean, I think it works as a one sleeve anyway, you know? I still like the way it looks. It definitely takes away from it being most accurate to what Jenny's wearing, but I still think it looks cute. Okay, so this is one very obvious tip, but I would highly recommend not sewing the front and back together until much later in the process. After I cut that shape out in the front, I didn't have enough bias tape to do the things I wanted to do next. So in order to feel productive, I sewed the front and back together. It added an extra layer of fabric that I eventually kind of sewed into by accident and then seam ripped a lot. So don't sew the front and back together until you pretty much have to, okay? So with my front and back pieces already sewn together, I tried the skeleton of a bodysuit on and then made alterations.
So I used a Sharpie so you can see how I'm marking it. So this is going to mean where I'm going to extend the neck a little bit, so I'll cut this part out, and then I also remember that I have to hem it. And then again, I'm going to open up the armhole a little bit more. So basically the way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to cut this part out and then copy the same amount onto the other side.
Mama told me one day I'd be famous. Remember when she used to say she hate this. That ended with life when I say shit. Now I'm inside all them people's playlists. Till one day I'll be stomping on stages.
And then I cut a slit down the center of the back and put in the zipper. Another just bonus tip, the zipper I'm using in this is about 7 inches, but I would recommend one that was longer. So I put in the zipper, which is a lot less intimidating than you would think. Sewing in the zipper isn't difficult, but I do recommend watching either a video or reading a blog about it to refresh your memory in case. Okay, so now the rest of this is really just gonna be a walk and talk through because in the process of doing this, I was really stressed and really tired and I just wanted to get it done. So I kind of stopped filming as much. So I used black bias tape to finish off the raw chest seam here. And I also used black bias tape pretty much on everything I possibly could. I added a tulle panel to the hole there, and then more black bias tape strips down the center. And I actually had to add an extra layer of the bias tape onto like little chest panels as well because it was a little too revealing for my liking. And honestly, I'm still not super happy with the way it came out on this one either, but by the time I was done, I was done. In retrospect, or another time, I would probably work a little harder on that aspect of it. Then I sewed on my sleeve and finished all the raw edges with the black bias tape, except for the armhole. And with the armhole, I just did a rolled hem. To be more accurate to the original, most of it would probably just do a rolled hem aside from that neckline here, but lazy. That pretty much sums up how I made this. It definitely looks more complicated and I probably made it more complicated than it had to be, but in retrospect, it really wasn't that difficult. I just, took the scenic route to get there. I really love sewing and creating or altering pieces in order to recreate a design I love or make something completely unique. Fun fact, when I originally wanted to start a channel, say like 5 or 6 years ago, it was going to be a little more textile and fashion focused, where it'd be a lot of styling and outfits, as well as sewing DIYs and thrift flips and cosplay process as well. But aside from the fear of judgment and overall lack of confidence, it's just really hard to make some of these videos sometimes. I'm still learning when it comes to sewing, so trying to make a quality product like physically, as well as create one digitally, is hard, especially when I'm by myself doing it, But anyway, this is that final bodysuit in comparison to the original and then to the one on Jenny.